Welcome back everybody, I'm Nick930, and today I wanted to share with you my thoughts on id Software's latest entry to the signature demon-slaying first-person shooter series, Doom: The Dark Ages. For reference, this review is based on the PC release of the game, running on a 9800X3D, an RTX 5090 graphics card, and running at the highest available graphic options at a 4K resolution. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel to catch my upcoming direct comparison of Doom: The Dark Ages to Doom Eternal, set to be available on the game's release, and my upcoming documentary on the history of the Quake series, which will be available soon. Alright, so let's kick this review off by first taking a spoiler-free look at the story on offer. Now, Doom games have never necessarily been big on story, with the earliest entries relying mostly on text exposition screens at the end of chapters that can be mostly summed up as, guy has pet bunny killed by demons, so he kills demons. Doom 3 attempted to retell that story with a more serious tone to a slightly mixed response, and so, a decade later, Doom 2016 opted to take a hybrid approach, integrating a more serious story into the action, but ensuring the gameplay and over-the-top style remained the top priority. This was carried forward into 2020's Doom Eternal, though we did start to see a little bit more narrative sprinkled in, with third-person cutscenes of the Slayer and bonus add-on chapters that help to explain the Slayer's transformation into this unstoppable, godlike weapon. Which brings us to Doom: The Dark Ages, a prequel entry to this modern era of Doom that aims to flesh out that background lore further and explores the beginning of a massive interdimensional war between the human-like Sentinels and the demonic forces of Hell. Supporting the Sentinels are an advanced race called the Makers, who have mostly acted as gods to lesser life forms like humans and provided them with technological enlightenment along with the promise of life after death. At the onset of the war with Hell, the Makers unleashed their powerful new weapon, the Doomslayer, a lost soul whose past battles with the demons have turned him into a bloodlusting monster, only empowered further by means of the Makers' divinity machine. This is where the Dark Ages effectively begins, giving us a glimpse at the opening invasion from Hell's forces and the Slayer's early deployment onto the battlefield. Because this is a prequel, players familiar with the lore should be able to piece together most of what happens, though it's worth noting that this is only the start of this new Dark Ages chapter, and id Software is likely to expand on it further, either with expansions or maybe even new games. When taken as its own standalone story, the Dark Ages plot is straightforward and handled differently from the last two games. There's more cutscenes thrown in, with new supporting characters that are okay, but not necessarily all that compelling. Though I'll give this latest entry credit for separating out the exposition into these cutscenes more prominently, as opposed to having these long, drawn-out dialogue bits playing out over top of the gameplay like in the past. You do still get occasional voice comms ringing in, but they're much shorter and less intrusive. And if you don't care about the story and just want to rip and tear, you can easily skip those opening cutscenes and jump straight into the action. Which brings us to the most important aspect of the Dark Ages, the gameplay. Dark Ages aims to completely reinvent the Doom formula, or rather, redirect it back to what the series originally played like back in the 90s, ditching the extreme aerial maneuverability of the past couple entries and opting for a more boots-on-the-ground approach. This is a very interesting choice, considering Doom Eternal played much more like Quake than any Doom game, with boost pads, aerial strafing, and precision aim taking priority over strafing back and forth between projectiles. And this possibly suggests that the developers are looking to differentiate these two properties more clearly in the future. But that's not to say that Doom: The Dark Ages is any slower. It can still be extremely chaotic, and trades in the verticality of Eternal in 2016 for flatter, open-ended spaces, loaded with large groups of enemies and lots of ways to deal with them. To account for these new environment styles, the Slayer's core mechanics have been greatly overhauled. The dash maneuver, for example, doesn't return here, replaced by a more standard sprint key instead, that's required to perform long jumps and clear larger gaps. Climbing surfaces is also massively simplified, removing the requirement to manually grab the surface, and even forcing the Slayer to automatically climb upwards. This means there's no back eject or ability to climb around objects either. And horizontal bars used to swing across platforming sections are gone too, likely the result of the mixed response from players regarding Eternal's platforming focus. In place of all these removed features, Dark Ages introduces mechanics built around the Slayer's new Shield Saw that is featured prominently all throughout. The shield can be used to block projectiles, deflect, or parry attacks, as you can probably already guess. But it can also be used to charge at targeted enemies to clear large distances, and thrown, either slicing weak enemies in half, or getting embedded into larger enemies, temporarily stunning them while you rip them apart. By upgrading the shield using special shrines found in the world, players can even add defensive buffs to enhance their parry ability further, with 4 different reactionary effects dealing damage to enemies in different ways, like lightning, shockwaves, ghost daggers, or a shoulder-mounted turret. They all seem to accomplish the same goal in the end, but some of the upgrades for each rune can help to differentiate them further. The shield is also used to interact with the world too. You can bash through weak walls or relocate large climbable blocks, throw it at blue energy nodes to open doors, break open superheated metal locks to release gates, and toss it at green flesh nodes to perform a recall jump and clear even larger gaps. Though the combat remains the heart of the Doom experience, and it's important to emphasize the Dark Ages' new tagline, "Stand and Fight." Again, unlike Eternal's fast-paced aerial dodging and precision, Dark Ages wants to keep players on the ground, weaving in and out of slow-moving projectiles while sending a ton of lead into several demons simultaneously. You feel like a walking tank in this game, and it's one hell of a power trip, especially once you unlock every upgrade and start mowing through enemies. And it's arguably a bit too easy at the default medium difficulty, so I do recommend more seasoned players consider making adjustments at the start with the highly customizable difficulty slider, especially the default speed of those projectiles. As mentioned previously, the shield is a big part of this combat loop, as it can be used to block any incoming red projectiles, and can also be used to parry green projectiles, referred to as Hell Surge attacks. Doing so will reflect the green attacks back at the enemy, which is a key mechanic in that it can replenish the player's limited melee attacks. Like Eternal, Dark Ages features a variety of melee-centric strikes that are critical to a consistent combat flow. The chainsaw in Eternal, for example, wasn't as much of a weapon as it was a tool to replenish ammo from weaker enemies. Glory kills, on the other hand, were used to replenish the player's health, and lighting enemies ablaze with the shoulder-mounted flame belch churned enemies into armor fountains, which was most effective to trigger before killing stronger demons to quickly regenerate the player's full armor set. Then there was the Blood Punch, that was a powerful AoE attack, useful when surrounded to clear space, but required those glory kills to recharge. And finally, there was the Crucible Sword, that acted as a powerful get-out-of-jail-free card, in that it could instantly kill any standard enemy type with a single slash, but required much less common Crucible pickups to use. The Dark Ages changes up all of these mechanics, simplifying the flow considerably by featuring 3 melee weapons that have to be toggled via the inventory screen. All 3 melee weapons, when used, will give the player varying amounts of ammo, with the combo-oriented power gauntlets granting small amounts of ammo, the flail a medium amount, and the dread mace full ammo. But to balance these out, they also have different cooldown speeds, allowing you to choose the tool that best suits your combat style. This melee system works together with the shield parry system I mentioned earlier, as a successful Hell Surge parry will quickly regenerate the player's melee attack, allowing them to strike enemies more often and replenish ammo when necessary. As for the demons themselves, you may have already noticed a few changes, some cosmetic-based and others gameplay-oriented. I'll be going over all those design changes in more detail with my main comparison video, but I did want to point out some of those gameplay changes briefly. In general, not every demon from Eternal makes a return here. There's a few notable exceptions like the Baron of Hell, the standard Pinky, the Archvile, and the Pain Elemental. In their place, Dark Ages adds in a few newcomers like the Pinky Rider, the Cosmic Baron, and the Komodo. They've even added in a new Imp variant called the Stalker, that's more reminiscent of the classic version of the Imp featured in the original Doom games. A lot of the returning demons are also built around those new gameplay mechanics too, sending out red and green attacks that can be blocked or parried, and wearing new metal armor panels that can be superheated with firearms and blasted off with a quick throw of the shield. They've also scrapped the more annoying mechanics from Eternal, like the buff totems and the optional empowered enemies, replacing them with new leaders and enforcers or morale encounters that all force players to focus on specific enemy types in large crowds to gain the upper hand. So generally, the core of the game does remain the same. There's lots of tools at the Slayer's disposal, and you need to learn how they all work together to maximize your health, armor, and ammo, and keep the action moving. But it's designed in a way to maximize those larger battle zones and new shield mechanics, offering a very different, yet somewhat familiar experience that's just as satisfying to master. Dark Ages also features a brand new arsenal of primary weapons to play around with too, each spiritually similar to previous iterations, but with a few Dark Age twists. While the weapons all look inventive and have great designs, I did find mechanically that several of these weapons had very little practical use. The Skull Crusher was fun to use, for example, but I found the Plasma Cycler to be much more powerful and effective at clearing crowds and dealing with larger enemies at the same time. The longer range Rail Spike Impaler was also so limited on ammo and speed that it never felt as effective as the Precision Scope in Eternal, especially considering things like weak spots aren't carried over in this game. And the Grenade Launcher feels practically useless when compared to its Vampiric Rocket Launcher alternative. Generally, I found myself sticking to only one variant per weapon class, and because weapon attachments need to be manually toggled within a cumbersome inventory menu, rather than having a simple hotkey like in the past, there was less incentive to experiment in general. Though, despite this, I did make use of every weapon to complete challenges and enjoyed most of the unique mechanics built around them. The player can upgrade all of their weapons using new Sentinel shrines located in each level. These function like storefronts, where players can spend found gold, rubies, and wraith stones to empower their weapons, shield, and melee attacks. This is very different from Eternal, where there were these unique gear collectibles like suit tokens and weapon upgrades that had to be found separately. And instead of requiring the completion of challenges to reach the full potential of any weapon, the mastery challenges in Dark Ages only unlock a unique gold skin instead, making it far easier to wield the most powerful version of each firearm. Speaking of power trips, Dark Ages also features some brand new sequences throughout the campaign centered around the titanic robots called the Atlans. Previously seen only as ruined relics of the past, these robots can be fully controlled now, with a set of basic melee mechanics and simple level designs allowing players to go toe-to-toe with those giant demons. They're generally pretty short, simple sections, and I definitely recommend playing these with a controller if possible to get that full effect from the game's rumble effects. Though I will say that this feature would have been better off used more sparingly. There's at least 3 of these sections throughout the game that use these robots, and they're pretty much all the same and get repetitive very quickly. The new dragon sequences aren't quite as tedious, as they offer players a chance to fly around some very large environments and even dismount at set locations and fight on foot, which is a nice way to incorporate larger spaces while still maintaining that more focused flow of the combat. Though the bits where you're locked into dodging cannon fire and shooting back do feel a bit dated as well, and just as repetitive as those Atlan robot fights. Dark Ages also doesn't see the return of the Slayer's floating Fortress of Doom hub area, or even any equivalent to that feature. The game follows a much more traditional level format, with the main menu offering options to replay levels with already discovered gear, and the option to fully adjust the difficulty settings, including new customizable settings like adjusting enemy aggressiveness, projectile speed, health, and other granular detail. You can go back and scour the levels for missed collectibles, complete weapon challenges, and try to unlock rare skins, but there's not much to do once you've unlocked them all, and some additional challenge options would have been nice. This, coupled with those dragon and giant mech sections, along with the fairly basic main story, all contribute to this weird, overarching sense of Dark Ages feeling like a game from the Dark Ages, or at least something I would have expected from the mid-2000s. There were times when I was jumping around large open fields shooting tanks with rocket launchers that I swear I was controlling Master Chief for a moment. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as there were a lot of great games from that time period, and that fun sense of scale was a big reason for why they were so enjoyable. But it certainly comes off feeling more dated than even the more linear experiences in 2016 or Eternal. This, along with the lack of a multiplayer component, horde mode, or even a New Game Plus option, contribute to the Dark Ages feeling like a bit of a step back feature-wise. There's no doubt room for the developers to add to the experience further with modes like these, or at least something comparable. But there's no question that fans of the series will feel something is missing here, even if they like the changes that were made to the core gameplay. So, what do you guys think of the new Doom: The Dark Ages? Is this what you expected? Let me know in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this posted every week.